What's up, everybody? Welcome back once again as we get ready for the 2024 edition of what I consider to be the biggest rugby tournament outside of the World Cup, the Rugby Championship. I big on TikTok again now, and I have met a young man who is a Kiwi, but is not living in Aotearoa, is living in England because Aotearoa hours in America do not work.
Yeah.
Um, so go ahead and introduce yourself, man. Let everybody know where you're staying, where you're from, and where you're staying, man.
Yeah, g'day. I am, my name's Aiden from Wellington originally. Grew up, spent my whole life there, and recently just moved to the UK. I'm living in London, exploring the big city, something a little different, a little bit of a change of pace from a small city guy like me. But no, loving it. I mean, lots of rugby to watch over here. Time zones for Europe games are a lot easier, especially for the Northern Tour games that are coming up, which I'm looking forward to. Can't say the Super Rugby season was an easy watch. Was getting up at 3 a.m. some mornings to watch all the games, but no, it's good. Just another diehard Kiwi rugby fan that's just on the other side of the world.
Yeah, man, it's kind of funny. I've been back here in the U.S. for 7 years now, and the whole time watching Super Rugby is like the earliest the games would start was like Friday nights at like 11:30 p.m. But most of them were between like midnight and like 4 in the morning. And when you love rugby, it's what you do. You get up in the middle of the night to watch games.
Yeah.
But with that being said, obviously, I've brought on an all-black fan here, a diehard from windy Wellington, where it is impossible to roll a rolly cigarette because the wind is just blowing the tobacco everywhere the entire time. But so let's go ahead and start off with before all of this, 2019 out in the semifinal. I think probably one of the most notorious photos in rugby history of Owen Farrell sneering down the haka. You go home, you go away with the bronze, you do beat Wales and come in third place, and it is the end of an era of 92% win percentage in Steve Hansen. Look, even as a Springbok fan, the greatest rugby coach in history. I don't think there's much of an argument. And you bring in Ian Foster, who had been the yin and yang with Steve Hansen during all those years. And it doesn't quite go the way it did with Hansen quite a bit. Eventually falling to your lowest ranking in history at number 5. And it's not all for naught. You do make another deep run. You do make it to the final in 2023. But in the last 4 years, what would you feel was the lowest point, and what did you feel was the highest point?
Oh, lowest point. I mean, I think any failure for a New Zealand fan's perspective is losing at home. I think that's the biggest one. Like, eventually teams are going to beat you. That's just the nature of the game. The records we have won't stand forever. It's just going to be like that. I think, obviously, losing to Ireland at home was a big one, but they were coming up as number 1 in the world. I mean, it was a big shock to a lot of Kiwis, I think. I think they were the most upset by that one, or angry that we didn't change as much. But I think, losing to Argentina, and I think it was in Christchurch, that it was just sort of out of the blue. It was a game that if you watched it for the first 25 minutes, you're like, oh, we've got control of this. This is going to be another walkover. And then we could just never convert any opportunities. And then Emiliano Boffelli just slaughtered us off the tee. I think he kicked eight from 8 goals that night or something like that. That was a tough pill to swallow, but in the same vein, obviously they beat us in Argentina the year before, I want to say. And that was cool. Like, I know a lot of Kiwis weren't happy with our first loss to Argentina, but it meant so much to them. It was really cool to watch them celebrating, a massive achievement for that rugby team.
So less than 2 years removed from that game where Argentina beat New Zealand for the very first time, I actually had the great fortune of meeting and interviewing Mario Ledesma He was here in Dallas for a bit, coaching with assistant coaching with our side here. And I asked him like what that meant to him, and he was like, "Yeah, man, like you don't like." Considering Argentina didn't become professional until 2012,
Yeah.
they
It was cool.
literally.
I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a Kiwi that is like still upset about that. I think even me and my mates, we were watching their celebration, and we just thought that's awesome. You know, that's the love for rugby.
Fair play to Argentina. Fair play to the Pumas. They deserve the win.
Yeah, so. Exactly right. And showing their love for rugby, and that obviously it's not the biggest sport in Argentina, with football being so far clear of it. Like, it's not even close, right?
Yeah.
To see the joy and the passion that they still have for the game was really cool to see. So I think, going back to your original point, lowest point is probably the series loss to Ireland. I think that hurt the most by far. We didn't just lose one game, we lost two in New Zealand, and that doesn't happen, especially in a row. I think it's the first time we've lost two games in a row in 20 plus years or something.
So I've been currently working on a long form video talking about, it was a question that I had posed on a TikTok video earlier this week about how New Zealand is, and their back-to-back victories, we, as Springboks, we don't get the same air. And in my research for it, so you lost to Australia and South Africa in 2012, okay, back-to-back. You didn't do anything else back-to-back again until 2017, and that's when you lost to the British and Irish Lions. I was at that game.
Yeah,
and you tied them in the final game. That was 5.5 years where I think you had a grand total of 4 losses.
Yeah,
4.
And I think I saw that video you posted about the question of why there's sort of a different perspective on what people might have between the 2019-2023 Springboks and the 2011 to 2015 All Blacks. And I think, while I don't think there should be much difference in the way people view them, because they're obviously back-to-back world champs, if you had to put it under a magnifying glass, which people are going to do when they compare, is you just look at the stuff in between. And that's the biggest difference, realistically, is that from 2011 to 2015,
you didn't lose.
I think we lost 3 times in 4 years.
Yeah, 3 times. You lost 4 times in 5 years.
Yeah, so that's an impressive achievement in itself. But yeah, as I said, I don't think there should be too much discrepancy in the way they're valued. I still think, back-to-back world champs is crazy. 4 years apart to have a largely different team on both occasions, other than your stalwarts, your Rich McCaws, Dan Carters, Eben Etzebeth, Andre Pollards, etc., etc.
Yeah.
The team changes, coaching staff changes, so to be able to be best in the world 2 times in a row is crazy stuff.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the low. We talked about that. What was the high point during the Foster era, in your opinion?
We were so close to a World Cup, weren't we? Like, after all that rubbish, New Zealand rubbish, you still had like a 60% win rate, which isn't great, but it's not bad compared to other nations. It's just that our standards are so high. I think the high and the thing that gave New Zealanders the most joy from watching that team is winning that quarterfinal. That was my high for the All Blacks too. Yeah, it was. I remember I was here watching it, and I'll tell you what, I have never been so nervous for a game as I have that game. I was like, the Irish are on form. They're the team to beat. At that point in time, they were the team to beat.
Yeah.
They were encroaching on our unbeaten record of games won in a row. So that's on the line as well. Because if they beat us, they tie it. And then they would have had Argentina in the semi, which I think they would have beaten.
They would have beaten with ease, yeah.
And they would have made the final. So they would have had the longest win streak of any team, which I would have hated. And every Kiwi would have hated. So that quarterfinal was pretty special.
I mean, to be fair, and I admit this as a Springbok fan, I didn't pick the Springboks in 2019. I picked the All Blacks to 3-peat.
Yeah, I can't say I did any different, but I'm a little biased.
I didn't pick New Zealand to beat. I thought Ireland was going to beat. I thought we were going to play Ireland again in the final. And I think after going back and watching that game, I think I watched it 4 times. I realized a couple of key things that I did notice. One is that Ireland never rested their first team. They played their first team against Romania and Tonga.
Yeah, I think they'll look back on that, and obviously they wanted to keep players fit and have no, game rust. But obviously that is the backfiring aspect to it. I think you see probably the last 10 minutes of that game, you see the big difference in fitness, and I just think that's down to how much game time those guys were getting. But I mean, credit to both teams in that game. They both
played very well.
A lot of Irish supporters will say they played poorly. Well, they clearly didn't. The All Blacks had just their best game under Ian Foster, and it just happened to be that game.
I still think back to that kind of being like kind of a pivotal moment. When that happened, it changed my mind about what could potentially happen. Like, I knew when you knocked out Ireland that we were going to play you guys in the final. Like, I knew immediately that's going to be the final. It's going to be the All Blacks and Springboks. It's going to be, and I think for the European rugby world, it wasn't the final they wanted. For those of us who grew up on Southern Hemisphere rugby, it was the final that we wanted. We wanted it. Like,
100%. I think. I think there's definitely the argument to be made that those should have been should have been semi-finals, and I completely agree with that. I think Ireland, New Zealand, France, South Africa as semi-finals, those games, they'd be talked about forever. I mean, they were incredible quarterfinals, but you sort of had like just a little friendly match next to it for the other 2 semi-final spots. I mean, Fiji went closer than we thought.
Yeah.
Wales, Argentina, again, close game. So they were still exciting. It just didn't feel like the best teams at the time got through, which I can understand being upset about.
I also felt that the pools were horribly placed. The first 2 pools had 3 ranked teams in them, like high ranked teams. I'll tell you a shocker for me in 2023 pool. I thought Italy was going to come out there and give you guys a run, and you guys absolutely beat the living hell out of them. Like, what was it,
197, 13, I think.
Yeah, like, you absolutely beat the unholy hell out of Italy. Especially, there's an app called Super Brew where you can make score picks in rugby. I was actually ranked out of a pool of like 3,000 people. In the very first week of the Rugby World Cup, I picked 100%, and I got the bonus point because I picked 27-13 France over the All Blacks. And the only reason I picked that was because it was France at home. It was France at home. And I was like, okay, they're going to have the crowd on their side. But obviously, you get the silver medal the second the runner up, or if you're an arsehole about it, the first loser. It's like, it's either first or last. I don't have that mentality. I still think the All Blacks were a hell of a team, and as much as it might piss off some of my fellow South African fans, I think if that red card had not happened, I think we would have saw a different score at the end. I think it could have gone. It could have gone either way.
Ifs, buts, and maybes, it isn't the way it went, so that's not how the story will be told.
So we get through all of that last year, a little bit of break. You live in the Northern Hemisphere now. I started following Northern Hemisphere rugby in the last 2 years. So I have to just make a few comments about that. I liked Super Rugby, international tests. You get the Curry Cup and the NPC kind of going in the background. And then back into you get the end of year internationals, and that's not how they do it in Europe. They run their competition at the same time. They run the Six Nations at the same time, the Champions Cup at the same time, and the Challenge Cup all at the same time.
Yeah,
I don't like that personally.
There's a lot going on all the time.
Because it's like you'll be watching Premiership, and then there's like a 3-week break. It's like, okay, guys, maybe you should separate everything. Like, we do in the Southern Hemisphere. You separate everything.
Yeah.
So, but we get into that. Six Nations happens, and then we finally start getting Razer. Razer was already kind of in the midst during the World Cup. You kind of saw him. He was at the game sometimes, that kind of thing. When they announced Scott Robertson as the head coach, what was your initial, like, did you know it was a foregone conclusion? You knew he was the next coach, or were you kind of shocked at all about it? Or
No, not really. I mean, he was, one of the leading candidates when Foster was picked as well. People wanted him then when he'd only had, I don't know, 4 Super Rugby titles in a row or whatever.
Only four.
I think it was a bit of a weird move to announce it the way they did. Obviously, they said regardless of what happens at the World Cup, he'll be the next coach. I just don't think they needed to do that during the World Cup camp. It seemed a little rude.
Kind of made you feel for Fozzie just a little bit, because it's like, yeah, dude, you're not keeping the job, bro. You could win and you're not keeping the job.
Yeah, and I think he did a great job regardless. And I think there are a lot of Fozzie haters in New Zealand especially, and I was never one of them. I doesn't mean I liked everything that he did, but I wasn't one of those people that just started hating him on him in like Facebook comment.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, as I was saying, I think Fozzie did a great job under the circumstances. Obviously, got a lot of hate here in New Zealand, or not here in New Zealand, but back in New Zealand. And while it's kind of understandable to be criticised for that job, there's a lot of expectations on it. I think there was a lot of like lynch mobbiness to it that was a little uncalled for. And New Zealand fans are the harshest critics on the New Zealand team. And that's just the way it is. It's what comes with being those players and that coaching staff. But it is tough to watch and see some of the comments sometimes, and you feel for those guys. But going back to what you said, yeah, it was sort of a shoe-in that Razer was going to be next, and a lot of people just couldn't wait for it. I mean, I was excited by it too, and I'm excited to see what steps come from now and how he builds the team into what he sees fit.
I can already comment on the fact that he has gone on like the breakdown, all these kind of things, and he's made himself available. Like, he's been very active on social media, that kind of thing. Outside of the youth aspect of what Razer brings to this, what is another thing that you think he really brings to the squad that Foster did not?
I mean, it's very hard for me to say, on a personal level what he's like. From all the things I've seen, he's a very down-to-earth guy. He starts the process from the very beginning, whether that's the environment or just the travel from one place to the next. Everything's got its own procedure. And I think he's a very detailed man, but he does it in a way that players think he's approachable, I would assume. Obviously, again, very hard for me to say what he's like as a person because I've not met him. But I think he brings a wealth of knowledge, as do all Blacks coaches. He brings in a great staff. I think he's really good at realizing the areas he may not excel at compared to other people. And obviously, he's brought in guys like Scott Hansen and whatnot to come in for those specific positions to make sure each individual part of the team is working at its best. And then he can work with those best players to create the team that he wants to put forward. So obviously, we've only seen a little bit of it so far, but it's exciting stuff.
How did you feel? I guess the controversy leading up into this initial English test was a man who I have a lot of respect for, Sir John Kerwin, former All Black, actually absolutely has done amazing things for the mental health community. I had seen a documentary a few years ago about the '87 All Blacks, and I had no idea that Kerwin had like mental health issues and he was fighting through them the entire time. And it made me have a different perspective on the guy. But there was him, Jeff Wilson, another former All Black, and they were kind of complaining about the style that the Springboks bring to this game. And then you play England and play pretty much that exact same style to get a single point victory under the glass roof there in Dunedin. Did you feel like that was, I mean, obviously you're happy you got the win, but was it like not the prettiest? Were you like, oh, this wasn't really what I was hoping for, or were you like just happy for the win?
I wouldn't say it wasn't what I was hoping for. I mean, at the end of the day, I'll take a win in any shape or form. I think from what I can see, and my guess is the way he's trying to build this team and the way they play is it's not going to be your traditional All Blacks that play a specific type of rugby. I think they're going to be a team that plays the rugby that beats the opposition. And I think it'll change week in, week out. And I think, obviously, I saw that thing with John Kwin and Goldie, Jeff Wilson, talking about. Obviously, Jeff quite likes the way the Springboks plays, but John Kwin's not a fan. But yeah, rugby can be entertaining in all shapes and forms. You can have an opinion on whether you like it or not. I think it's effective. That's at the end of the day, if it wins your World Cup, it wins your World Cup. It's a good rugby style. I don't think there's good or bad. There's just stuff you enjoy more. But yeah, going back to the way Razer's sort of building it, I think it was always going to be a bit of a tough slog that first game out. England obviously starting to fire a little bit. They played really well against Japan, had a great finish to their Six Nations campaign, obviously beating Ireland and coming close with France. I think that was their time to win, a game in New Zealand. And
they missed. They
very nearly did, and it was a great game. I think a few individual performances helped us out in that game. But I'm excited I like the way that he's deciding to play. He said in his selection process he's going to pick the teams that beat the opposition. So they might not be the same squads week in, week out, or the same starting 15. And I love that because it means you get to see a different style of rugby every week, and it's really hard to play against. I think everyone could agree we didn't play that great, and the fact that we didn't play great and still won the game is a very positive thing.
Yeah.
I think people look at it and go, we didn't play great, we got lucky, rather than we didn't play great, but we still got the result. And I think that's something the players and the coaching staff will all really build from, and I think it goes onward and upward from there. Obviously, Fiji was a good little hit out as well. Some bleeds.
That wasn't a game. That was over in 30 minutes, man.
But great to see some young talent come through. Obviously, Rasima, who's played 1.5 games, came off after 30 minutes, and Noah Hotham, who just got called up, played 50 minutes and played really well. So,
Yeah, it was I did not go to that game. Obviously, it was in San Diego at Snapdragon Stadium, which is actually, that's where the MLR final is taking place this weekend. Okay, cool. So we did get some big news later on. The All Blacks are coming back to the U.S. to take on Ireland and Chicago. And I don't think I need to remind you of what happened the last time that happened. It ended your winning streak, but the plan is to fly up for that one, and if people have asked me what jersey am I going to be wearing at that game, it ain't gonna be green. We'll just leave it at that. I think I'm gonna do the All Blacks kit with the SA Rugby hat. That's what I'll do. I think when it comes to Southern Hemisphere rugby, I will support anyone except Australia at this point.
Yeah, pretty much.
But so obviously, getting ready, 2024 Rugby Championship. It's going to be, technically 4 new coaches. Rassi had stepped down for 4 years to let Jacques Nienaber take over the squad. So three out of the 4 coaches are new coaches coming in. We've got Joe Schmidt in Australia. I think Australia is riding on a bit of a high, having played no one yet, getting to play Wales, the worst team in the Six Nations, and Georgia, who made them look bad at times. And then we've got a completely new coaching staff in the Pumas, and that's who you get to play starting out this tournament. The first game, I believe it's at the K-10 in Wellington on the 10th. What are you... Obviously, I am going to pick the All Blacks to win this one, but with it being in your hometown, your home stadium, what are you hoping to get to see? Are you hoping that we possibly get to see Beauden Barrett start at 10, maybe again? After the performance he had I think he's kind of earned it, man.
Yeah, I think it'll be. Look, it's hard to say what Argentina are going to bring. Obviously, we saw a little bit of them against France. One game they were horrific, and then the next game they showed a bit of class. So I'm not really sure what they're going to bring, so I can't really speak on that. I think, they'll bring the passion, they'll bring some physicality. That's a given with an Argentinian team, but the way they play will be a bit unknown. In terms of selections, I think since they're quite a physical team up front, and I think they do really well in the first 40. I think that's their strength. The games they have won against us, they've managed to hold it together for 80 minutes, but that's sort of been a rare occurrence. So I think we'll pick quite a heavy, powerful forward pack. I think
they're known for their scrum. They are known for their scrum.
So I think you'll see the likes of Tamati Williams. Maybe
I was actually going to ask that next.
Maybe starting, I think, with someone like Tosi coming off the bench. But no, I mean, you're probably more likely to start Lomax and De Groot, and then I would like to
with Cody Taylor at hooker, starting at hooker, Cody Taylor.
And then I'd like to see Almua, Tosi, and Williams come off the bench. I mean, any time you can bring on 450 kilos almost off the bench on your front row alone, it seems like a good thing. And it's not like they're slow. If you've seen any of the Super Rugby, Tamati Williams got injured pulling a hammy in a 40-meter sprint. And Tosi...
People thought he got hurt in a game. No, he got hurt.
Yeah. And then Tosi's like a human wrecking ball, man. He was playing great. And then, again, Almua. Man, that guy can clear some defenders. So it's an exciting... He was
one of those guys that I kind of thought was on the cusp for years, but there was just too much in front of him, I think. I will say this, Tamatai Williams, that is one, he's got a baby face. He looks like he's like 16 years old in the face. I just found out he has a kid. He does have a kid. And he's another one of those Kiwis that he'd never been to an All Blacks game. His first All Blacks game was a game he dressed because he was poor. He grew up poor, and I don't think people understand that there are poor people in New Zealand. There are poor people there.
Yeah.
And he's one of those guys that I think he just, that jersey means everything to that kid.
100%.
He lives and breathes for that jersey. And it's when you have guys like that on your team. I mean, Richie McCaw lived and died for that jersey. It didn't matter that he was captain. He didn't have to have the jersey on to look like Richie McCaw. It was you just knew. And I feel like with Williams, you have a potential centurion there at 23 years old. He could turn into a centurion, man. And I'm here to watch it the whole time. I'm going to watch him. He's become one of my new favorite players on the All Blacks just because he's such a big guy, and he just...
He's got a huge engine too. He just keeps going.
Just vicious. He's just vicious, man. It's like you get those guys that know that it's either rugby or poverty. And it's you have it. You see it there. So overall in the Six Nations, obviously you get 2 at home versus Argentina, and then
2 away.
Ellis Park, Johannesburg, Emirates Airlines Park, Johannesburg. It has been a fortress in the past.
Did they change the name of Ellis Park?
It's Emirates Airlines Park.
Oh, it's not as good.
Well, it's no longer Westpac. It's Wellington Regional now, but it's the
Sky. It's Sky.
Oh, is it Sky?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm going to call it Ellis Park. I'm sorry, Emirates Airlines. I'll be referring to it as Ellis Park for the rest of this conversation. Where's the second game?
The second game is in Cape Town Stadium. No longer no Newlands, but Ellis Park has been a fortress for the Springboks for many years. But there is one team. There is one team that has let it be known that it is not a fortress, and that is the All Blacks.
Ellis Park is Ellis Park. I don't think history doesn't really mean anything in terms of who's going to win the game. It is a tough place. It's such a hostile place too, and I love it. I mean,
you've seen the videos, right, of them getting off the bus and people are like cussing out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome. I don't condone anyone like getting hurt and whatnot, but the sheer competitive animosity, shall we say, it's cool. Like, it is awesome, and I think the players love it. I think they go in there going, yeah, this is a game we really want to win. And then obviously Cape Town, no slouch itself, to be fair, but definitely doesn't have the same aura to it as Ellis Park.
I still think that even at the end of the day, yes, I brought this up to people, and some younger people especially don't want to hear this, but it's like, look, this is the fact. The All Blacks have a winning record against every single rugby nation on the planet. The Springboks have a winning record against every nation on the planet except for the All Blacks. And it's like, if you look at like the teams that consider themselves at the top of the heap, there's no other teams that can say what we can say. Yeah. Like, Australia and England are up there too. Australia, not so. I mean, recently they're not so much. I mean, I think people tend to forget that Australia played in the 2015 final
against arguably the best team that's ever been fielded.
There's no argument here. Coming from a Springbok fan, that was the greatest team ever assembled. Ever assembled. The 2015 All Blacks is the greatest team ever assembled. Period. Point blank. So of the guys that have, so obviously, I think it's obvious. It's either going to be New Zealand or it's going to be South Africa winning the Rugby Championship. I know it's not. Could you see Australia getting a wooden spoon?
I mean, I actually think they're going to be a bit sneaky.
I think so?
I think Joe Schmidt, even though, they haven't played the highest quality of opponents, I think they're flying under the radar a little bit. And I mean, I will say, I did say this before the 2023 Rugby World Cup, and I was severely wrong. But I just think that you just can't underestimate someone like Joe Schmidt being in that environment. They obviously have player talent. That's not an issue, never has been an issue with Australian rugby. Yeah. The talent and depth that they have is still there. They've just never managed to keep it all together, and obviously funding and whatnot has been in the toilet for the last 5 years, really.
Yeah.
But I think they'll push us in one game. I think one New Zealand-Australia game will be, less than 5 points between the two teams. I think I could see a world where Australia win one game against every team in the Rugby Championship.
And I would like to argue, but the Springboks record in Brisbane ain't really the best. And that's where we started off. We start off in Brisbane, and I've been watching since it was the Tri-Nations, and especially in, like, I'd say the last 4 or 5 years, there's been times where there was no team that went winless. And I like that. When there's only 4 teams, I like it to be kind of tight, and there's been a couple of times where we just needed to get X amount of points and we could win it, and we just couldn't seal the deal. In the end, we didn't get enough points to win it, but I think that was 2021.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
Because we had Franz
in the final game, didn't you?
Yeah,
He
we
is
had to beat them by like 20 points or something like that,
yeah,
and I think we ended up only beating them by like 13. So
yeah.
it's kind of one of those. Another thing that I did want to discuss, kind of lastly here, we talked a little bit about the championship. We talked about the last 4 years. Something else I did want to bring up. So it's come up a lot, and I even made my opinions on it, which is it's becoming fairly obvious that a nation like New Zealand can't necessarily keep up with the Joneses, as they say, as far as money. And there's been a big push of opening your borders and saying, hey, you can still play for the All Blacks and play overseas. How do you feel as a Kiwi about that?
I think it's a good thing, but we need to be careful. I think that's the best way to put it. I like the idea of having like a loyalty system, required to be able to do that sort of thing. I mean, I know Wales do it. I know some other countries do it as well in terms of, I think you guys, doesn't really matter. You can play.
Springboks, you can play wherever because it's also because the rand is very weak. So outside of the Sharks, there's not really a team in South Africa that can pay competitively enough to keep guys. So that's why they ended it.
Yeah.
To me, if that does happen, I give it 18 months before England and Ireland are doing the same thing. And the reason being is I think if that happens, it's going to kick off a firestorm.
Yeah.
It's going to be a firestorm. And I hate to say it. I talk about it a lot because I do live in America. 2031 is going to be here before we know it. And World Rugby wants in. They want into the market here. Now, people can say, oh, rugby is not a big sport in America. It doesn't have to be big if you can pay $2 million contracts, which is nothing here.
Yeah.
And I do worry about it a bit. I do worry about that quite a bit because I came into this game in the amateur era. It's now long past. It's been 30 years basically since we left that era. And I think if New Zealand does it, that's going to be kind of the final nail in the coffin of that, unfortunately. And
yeah, I think they just can't fully open it up. They just can't do what South Africa does and let anyone play anywhere. I think it would have to be more like the Welsh system where, you have to have X amount of caps for the All Blacks
before you can bounce.
Before you can do it. So people like Bowden Barrett and Ardie Savea, which they already do some sort of weird little deal with anyways, like their contracts are special regardless. The ability to be able to send those guys over knowing they want to come back and play, that's fine. Obviously limit the number 2. I think Wales, is it 3 or 4 that they can have that are allowed to do that?
I think it's Wales. You have to have like 25 caps, I think, before you can even talk about it. And I mean, even with that, though, you see how bad Welsh rugby is. Not just the national team, but their professional, their URC teams are horrible. And I get like there's an Irish follower we both have, Tiernan, and I've been in discussion with him, and he thinks, oh, yeah, our guys stay here because they're loyal. And I'm like, no, they stay there because they have to.
Yeah,
if you guys change that rule, I guarantee you those guys would not stay because they love Leinster. They'd go to where they're getting the biggest paycheck.
Same things happened here. I mean, there's a few rugby players that, they play a little bit for the All Blacks and then they sort of miss out on a selection or they've been sort of hard done by for a few selections. Then
they bounce.
Look at Charles Piutau. Played what? Under 10 games for the All Blacks, I think.
I think he played like 6 or 7 or 8. Yeah.
And then became the highest paid rugby player in the world because he went to France. And he has All Blacks on his resume. So they're like, awesome, let's pay him a load of money. And they did.
And I think that's another thing. We played Portugal. Springboks played Portugal a couple of weeks back. The head coach of Portugal is a former All Black. One cap. He has one cap.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like if you say former All Black, it means automatically you're a premium player. You're a premium level player. And And I mean, I worry about it, but I know it's going to happen. It's just 5.5 million people cannot compete with 50 million people. The money is just not the same, unfortunately. Now, I would like it if they said you can play in Australia or you can play in Japan, but that's it.
Yeah, that would probably be a beneficial thing. Just keep Europe out of it. It would definitely keep it in the Pacific, really.
Because it would keep them at least local enough to where when there's a break, you can do a camp and everybody can fly in for camp. And that's it, you know?
Yeah, and I think it would be a good thing if they were to do something like that to introduce, you know, maybe only once every 2 years or something, but like a Pacific nation, like a proper Pacific Nations Cup where those teams that have All Blacks players in them come and play the Super Rugby teams and, you know, in the Pacific Islands or something. That would be awesome.
Well, I mean, like, look at how bad Moana Pacifica and the Drua were when they joined Super Rugby. And now, like, Artie, as a Wellington fan, as a Canes fan, how do you feel about Artie going to Moana Pacifica?
I think it's good for the game. I mean, it's upsetting, obviously, don't get me wrong, but we had the whole season without him this year, and
you did damn good.
We topped the table, and, you know, other than one poor performance in a semi-final, we did really good. And we have really good loosies at the Hurricanes at the moment. Spoiled for choice, really. So I think him going to Moana Pacifica can only be seen as a good thing.
I think it turns them. They were competitive. I think it brings them in. Now the sad part is I think those poor Landers. They're going to be at the bottom. They're going to be at the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, they're everyone's second favorite team. Well, maybe not anymore with the Drua and Moana Pacifica, but before those two joined, they were every New Zealander's second pick team, I think.
Yeah, because they were the little team that could.
Pretty much.
And everybody hated the Crusaders.
Yeah, and then the Blues. I mean, nobody.
Oh, God. So
it's an Auckland thing, though.
When I was there, the Blues were absolutely. The Blues were absolutely rubbish when I was there, and that's when they had like Sonny Bill. It was before Bowden Barrett got there, so it was like Sonny Bill Williams was there, Jerome Kaino was there, Charlie Faumuina, and they were horrible.
Yeah,
they were absolutely dog shit.
Yeah,
like, but that was also too. Yeah, and that was also back whenever like the joke was you could leave 2 New Zealand Warriors tickets on the dash of your car and go in somewhere. And when you came back, somebody had broken through the window and put like 2 more next to those tickets. Because nobody went to Warriors games. Like, you go to a Warriors game and there were like 1,200 people there. They were so bad.
Look at it now. Up the wires. Up the wires.
Yeah. It's crazy to see how everything's changed. Now, I got to ask you this. Which one hurt more, Bowden Barrett or Artie leaving?
Bowden Barrett. Big time.
Dude.
Because he's gone to another New Zealand team.
Well, the problem was for me with that whole situation was that before I knew anything, I thought the Barrett brothers were like city boys. I thought they were jet-setting city boys. And then somebody takes me to Plymouth, and I'm like, New Plymouth, and I'm like,
yeah,
these guys are from the farm, and they're like, yeah, they're farm boys, and I'm like, that's when Bowden moving to Auckland made 0 sense to me. It was like, you're moving to, dare I say, fuckboy central, basically. Jaffas, nothing but Jaffa. And I'm like, you're not a Jaffa. Are you going to become a Jaffa now that you're there?
Yeah, I mean, it stung. It really
that stung bad. Yeah, I bet. That was
only just previously won the Super Rugby title for the first time in our history.
And then Bowden's like, hey, I'm moving to Auckland.
Yeah, he obviously had, family reasons and life decisions that are more important than rugby, the reason he moves. But it doesn't mean it hurts any less. It was a terrible time to be a Hurricanes fan. Yeah,
It's so weird having all three brothers play on three different teams too. That's just so weird to me.
Yeah, it is. I don't even remember. I can't even remember Bowden Barrett playing. Oh, yeah, he played NPC for Taranaki.
Yeah.
Geordie played NPC for Canterbury.
Yep.
And I assume Scott played for Canterbury as well at NPC, or did he play for Taranaki?
I think he played for Taranaki, so they never even played at the provincial level together. And then you had Scott and Bowden in the Hurricanes, and you had Geordie and Bowden at the Hurricanes, Scott down in Canterbury winning championships. And Bowden decides, hey, I'm moving to Auckland. And it was, to me, it was like akin to like if Richie McCaw had done that. And Richie McCaw never would have done that. Like, he stayed a Crusader till the very end, and it was just kind of like, oh, it's like Michael Jordan leaving the Chicago Bulls. He's just like, oh, it's not right, man. It's not right, but it's the nature of the game. So,
I will say that move helped one player, and one player in particular. I think Geordie Barrett became a much better player after Bodie left. Whether that's just, maturing into the role or getting more game time, it was quite obvious to see that, in the years that he left, he became his own play, found that sort of leadership role as well, which he has now, and he's one of the best centers in the world.
I gotta say it, man. And I've said it in the past. I thought Geordie had the potential to be better than Bowden. He just never got the opportunity to do so. He to me, because he's 6'5", so he's tall as hell.
Huge.
He can play wing. He can play center. He can play fullback.
He can play 10 too. He's played every position in the back line except halfback.
He is deadly. That guy's. I still think the missed kick in the final, I think that had more to do with Peter Steph Toy rearranging his rib cage than it did him just having a bad kick. Because he got folded. And I think that probably was a bit of it too. But I still think Geordie Barrett, like if I had to pick Geordie or Bowden, I would actually pick Geordie over Bowden Barrett just because of his versatility. Because I don't think Bowden Barrett, I think Ben Smith was better at 15 than Bowden Barrett.
Ben from Accounts is one of the most underrated players ever.
Yeah. Ben Smith was, I love that guy. So crappy how his career kind of ended because he just got injured a lot towards the end. But when they moved him to the Blues, when they moved Bowden to the Blues, because originally I think they had Otari Black was playing 10, and they had Barrett at 15, and I'm like, this doesn't look right. Barrett's a 10. He's not a 15. And then history. Do you remember the first Blues Hurricanes game after Bowden had made the move? And I guess
Dane Cole scored a try in the corner.
And then went and grabbed Bowden and started dancing with everybody. I thought,
it was awesome.
Like a toasted sandwich with tin spaghetti, and that. What are the most Kiwi things of all time? Dan Cole's grabbing Bowden Barrett to celebrate his try. It was the most Kiwi.
He couldn't help it. He was laughing. He thought it was hilarious. It was so
They both did. They both did. Everybody. And that's what I loved about it. It's just you couldn't help it. It was one of those just ultimate Kiwi moments caught on film. So, speaking of which, one last thing before we end this: food items you miss from home.
Pies, meat pies.
What kind of meat pies, sir?
I mean, all of them. But if you made me pick one, I'd probably pick a steak and cheese.
I mean, come on, man. It's steak and cheese, chips, and an L&P, and you're set. You're set.
Mate, or the old tradie breakfast. You have a steak and cheese pie, a blue can of V, and a pack of ciggies. That's a tradie's breakfast. And
I know. I miss burger rings.
Yeah.
I miss the party mix of the lollies.
Yeah.
Like I can get both of those things here. They are insanely expensive. And the last time I ordered burger rings here, by the time it got to me, it was a bag of like like it had been crushed so many times. It was just crumbs, and I cried.
Yeah.
And pineapple lumps. I miss
I'll
pineapple
show you what
lumps.
else I miss. Oh, hold on. I got it.
Okay, go ahead.
1 second. Let me just unfold it. Don't know if this will come up right. Which hand is this? There you go.
Yeah, you're good.
I miss those.
What was the there was like the cider one, like is that Rumpy, something like
Scrumpy.
Scrumpy.
Yeah. Mate, that's like poison, but it's good for you.
It's like at 18, it's what you get for a couple of bucks, and you get trashed off of like one or two of them, and you're completely it's
best friend that.
So working with ice hockey teams there, whenever they'd have their end of the season, like just friendly inter-team scrimmage, they'd be drinking on the bench, and the goaltenders would have booze in their water bottles. And I remember it was a lot of Scrumpies, and it was a lot of the Jack and Coke in a can. It was a lot of those. And it made me realize you don't need much to make a Kiwi happy. You just need some food and some beer. And like, this is why I think Kiwis and South Africans get along so well, because they don't need much. They just need some good rugby, some good beer, and some good food. And like everything else is just, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So thanks for coming on, man. I do appreciate it. It's always keen to talk to my Kiwi Fano, even though you're not Modi at all, are you?
Unfortunately not.
Pacquiao. You're Pacquiao.
Yeah. It's not the culture, though, as all Kiwis do, I think.
Well, yeah, it's kind of crazy because it's so ingrained in the culture there that even if you're not Modi, you know a lot. Yeah. So thank you for coming on. What time do the games come on for you?
Well, the New Zealand games will all be like 7 a.m. Aussie games.
Lucky.
Aussie games are better. I think Aussie games are like 9 a.m.
9 a.m. Yeah, so the games in Australia are between like 11:30 and 1 in the morning. The games in New Zealand are like between 11 and like midnight here.
I think that's the same for South Africa. Though for us, I think South Africa games will be 7:30 plus 6 hours, 1, 2 in the morning. Yeah, so you'll get lucky when the games are in South Africa. I think you're only an hour different with them. For me, when the games are in Argentina, it's 1 hour difference. That's all it is. So yeah. The breaks of being Southern Hemisphere rugby fans living far from the Southern Hemisphere. So, but thank you again for coming on, man, and I definitely appreciate you coming on, bro. Thank you. Thanks for having me, having a good chat about some rugby. All right, man. Sure, brother.